morning, everyone. We will do the swearing of the new school board members before we open up the session for the regular reorganization meeting. Mr. Lower and Mrs. Luna.
We ordered it. It'll be in hopefully for the next meeting.
Thank you.
This meeting of the Denville Township Board of Education is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Daily Record and or to the Star Ledger of Morris County, has been delivered to the Township Clerk, and has been posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education office and at each of the school buildings in the district. Can you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Lure, I'll be calling the roll call. Mr. Lure?
Here.
Mrs. DeLuna? Here. Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Capello?
Here.
Mrs. Lindsay?
Here.
Mr. Cass?
Here.
Mr. Napoloni?
Here.
Our reports, the annual school election held November 3rd, 2015, as counted. The candidates, Mrs. Barbara DeLuna, at polls 912, absentee 141, for a total of 1,053. Mr. David Lure, at polls 914, absentee 137, for a total of 1,051. Now I would take nominations for school board presidents.
I would like to place the name of Dino Capello in for nomination for president.
Second.
Oh,
Okay. And I will nominate Barbara DeLuna.
One second. One moment. Mr. Cass. Our roll call, please state the name of the person.
Before we go down that road, can we maybe have the two nominees say some words
Absolutely.
about why they might be interested in being the vice president?
Absolutely. Mr. Capello, would you like to make a comment?
I'll defer, Mrs. DeLuna. Would you like to go first? Up to you.
Sure. Okay, this is my 7th year. I committed to another term, so I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here. Okay, why I want the job. So yeah, time is of an essence. I was on the fence about the time commitment, but you know, out of everything in life, you get out what you put in. I had a chat with my boss. I realized this time next year I'm going to be an empty nester, so the coaching responsibilities and others are naturally falling off the radar a little bit, and I feel like I can do a very good job as the role president. I'm subscribing to the 1 year and rotation schema that we've discussed previously. And being the vice president, I mean, I went to the school boards. I have 2 master's degrees, business and engineering. I think you all know me in some aspects, and I appreciate your support 1 year ago when, like, basically everyone that was on here did support the vice presidency. So I would like to continue on that vein and take a bite at the apple. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Capello?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you to Mrs. Lindsay for having the confidence to nominate me. Obviously, sitting here, I would lie to you if I said I wasn't apprehensive at the idea of being board president after 1 year on the board. It's definitely, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. But this last year, all of you have been unbelievably tremendous, given me so much support, and you've been so generous with your advice and with your help that I really feel that I've come a fairly long way in just a year. Also, I've been thinking a lot about it. To me, the board president's job is something that the board president basically molds the job to what their strengths are. And to me, being the board president really is about being a facilitator. Facilitator between all of us when we're having our debates, a facilitator between us and the administration. The board president's also an interface between the board and the public and the board and the administration. I've spent basically my entire business career doing that kind of job. I've basically always been bringing people together, whether that's customers with developers, whether that's management with labor, whether that's investors with other people in my company. I've spent a good part of my career basically trying to facilitate discussions, come to solutions, solve problems, bringing people together. I really believe, based on my experience, that when we're all together having a debate, if that debate is lively, if it's complete, we'll reach the best decision we can. And I think I can help move us in the right direction in terms of having these debates, having these discussions, and hopefully reaching the best decisions we can reach. So, thank you.
Thank you. When I call your name, please state the name of the person who were you voting for president. Mr. Luer?
Mr. Capello?
Mrs. DeLuna?
Myself?
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Capello?
Mr. Capello?
Mr. Capello?
Mrs. Lindsay?
Mr. Capello?
Mr. Cass?
I'm going to vote for Barbara.
Mr. Napoloni?
Dino.
Congratulations, Mr. Capello. You now assume the president role.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
That's the call for this. You do the next part.
Right, I'll do
No,
the I'll do the
Mr.
next
Capello,
part.
do the next
Okay,
part.
there we go.
please.
At this time, I will open up for nominations for the position of vice president.
I would like to nominate Mr. Anderson.
Any other nominations? Seeing none,
we get a chance for,
Would Mr. Anderson like to make say a few things?
Sure. Well, thank you for the nomination, Mrs. Lindsay. I feel similarly to Dino in the aspect that it's been only a year since I've been on the board, but I appreciate everybody's help with getting up to speed pretty quickly on the board, and I think that I'll work very well with Dino in supporting him and supporting this board on the goals and initiatives that we lay out as a board. So, thank you very much.
Our roll call, please state the name of the person, which is probably only one, for the vice president position. Mr. Lure,
Mr. Anderson?
Mrs. DeLuna,
Yeah, Mike?
Mr. Anderson,
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Capello,
Mr. Anderson?
Mrs. Lindsay,
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Cass,
Mr. Anderson? It's a landslide.
Mr. Napoloni.
Mike?
Thank you. Mr. President, would you like to have a comment?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, congratulations to Mr. Anderson, and thank you again. It would be great if we could all sit up here and say we could do everything we want to do in the coming year, and we had unlimited resources, and we'd be able to give every child to reach their maximum potential. Of course, we can't say that. That's not, why we're here. We're faced with limitations and challenges all the time. We have significant challenges coming in the year ahead. We have steady and fast rising costs for special education, our health and benefit costs, new curriculum requirements. We have I think a $24 million scope of work in our LRFP altogether. These are things we have to face. That isn't to say we haven't accomplished a great deal in the last year. I think we can all be proud of what we've done this last year. We disposed of the old board office. We began the process of exiting the trailers. We implemented honors in high school classes. We got through the first year of PARCC testing. We have STEM classes in the middle school. We're continuing to upgrade and expand our curriculum, and we accomplished a lot of facility repair and improvements this year. Again, these are things we can all be proud of. So for me, it's about what do we prioritize going forward? What do we value, and what's the most important thing we do? So I ask, what do we make? What do we produce? We don't actually send anything out into the world except little humans, and we hope that they're going to be well prepared going forward. So to me, that's our product. So when we talk about prioritizing during this year, I hope what we'll do is we'll always look back at student achievement, and we'll say, how does this affect student achievement? How does this affect the product that we turn out into the world? So I hope that while we're debating here in session, while we're in our committees, that we hopefully keep bringing that question to the fore. That's would be my goal for the year. So that's it.
Thank you.
Okay. So as we have done previously, we will hold off on assigning committees this evening. I would ask that each member email me in the next couple of days their preferences for committee assignments, and we will work to have those committees structured and implemented by our next meeting on the 11th. There are a couple of things on here I think that bear maybe a little bit of discussion. On the committee list, we have bylaws and policies, which is not an actual, is that not an actual committee? Or?
Our actual policy calls for all these committees.
Okay.
They don't all have to meet, but they have to be part of
They're
our
part of
policy.
the structure.
Correct.
Okay,
Unless we change the policy.
okay.
Our bylaw doesn't have,
Technology.
it has technology.
It does have technology.
It doesn't have bylaws and policy. The
That was something we've done.
0155 that you even sent us all.
Yeah, that's a committee that you've had on the agenda for a while, so we could remove that if it's not in the policy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
in
if it's not in our bylaws.
And we have been doing policies through the corresponding committee, the appropriate committee.
Correct.
Okay. So,
There are some that don't fit committees. Sometimes there's oddball ones that don't fit a committee. For example, the one that we just passed on authority, I mean, we can put it in something, but it's not really operations, but it more falls under operations than anything.
But those specific bylaws, we can, or policies, we can discuss as a board.
That's what we did,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
sure.
So. And then there are two things I'd like to maybe have some discussion on, is bringing back the meetings of the Technology Committee and also recharging for the current year the Security Committee. So I'd like to see if there's we could have some discussion about that and see how people feel. My thought about technology is, I personally have felt this year a bit disconnected from kind of where we are with technology. I know we were going to roll it into the various committees and have these discussions, but I think by virtue of shortening up some of the committee meetings, I think technology's been a little bit left behind. So I'd like to look at maybe reconstituting technology. Doesn't necessarily have to meet every month. Maybe it could meet less often. Maybe it could be teleconference. I don't know. But again, something to open up for discussion. Security, the same thing. I feel like security is not that important until it's unbelievably important. So I think I'd like to try to keep it in everybody's minds and make sure that we're all aware of what's going on from a security point of view. So again, this is something I'd like to open up for discussion and get everybody's thoughts on.
Well, I personally think that we went through a period of time with the technology committee sort of more ad hoc. It wasn't in our bylaws, and then when we changed the bylaws, looking at the date, I guess it's over 2 years ago, we decided to include it. And I understand why we decided we didn't need it this past year. I didn't agree with it then, but I heard and understood. So if it's not actually happening, the dialogue, it used to happen in the Instruction and Program Committee, which I haven't served on this year. So if it's not actually going back to having the discussion there, I know it didn't happen in Finance and Buildings and Grounds because that's the committees I serve on. And I would agree that we should reconstitute it, which doesn't take anything considering it's, in our bylaws. And I would agree, it may not need to meet all that often, but just to bring the board back up to speed on what's going on. And especially maybe before budgeting time, to have a better idea of what type of money allocations sound right from a curricular standpoint. I mean, I have always believed, and I think the board must have felt similarly, that it's the curriculum that should drive what technology we have in the school. So that's why it made sense to have it in that committee. So you need to have somebody talking about that and making a recommendation to the board, not just the finance committee allotting an amount of money. As for security, I don't see how it's not a very important thing, and it's something that's been charged by the past 2 presidents, and I believe is well within your rights to recharge in whatever form you see fit as for acceptance.
Okay. Anyone else?
I don't want the perception to be that security is not important to the administration and to anybody on this board. I think that we all know how important it is, and I know that Mr. Forte knows intimately how important it is, and he has done some training with the Alice and a lot of these things that are above and beyond what other districts are doing, and we're certainly meeting that obligation. I think, to me, it's more knowledge for me as to what's going on. I would appreciate kind of knowing a little bit more on what our outlook is on future things we're looking at to ensure that we have the schools secure, because obviously instructing our kids or our students are extremely important, but the safety of our staff and students is at least as important. And for technology, I kind of feel the same way as Dino and Mariana. I'd like to kind of just get a refresh. I know we've done a tremendous amount of work, and I know Mrs. Costanza is working very hard on infrastructure as well as software and all sorts of things. And it might be nice to kind of get a little refresher on kind of where we're at and kind of looking forward on it. I know in IMP we didn't discuss very much from a technology standpoint, so probably just due to the fact that we've tried to be a little bit more consolidated and efficient with the meetings. So it might be a good idea to kind of recharge that also, or get started back with it again. So I agree, Will.
Okay. I think, to tag on to what Mariana said, the technology is so much involved with the day-to-day classrooms, and I've really seen that evolve since I've been on the board. We're doing a lot more now than we did when I first started. I think it should be part of the curriculum committee and part of their agenda. because it's a learning tool, and more things are going to be done on computers as we go forward, and on tablets also. And I think we've made a lot of progress. And this recent coding initiative that was done, I think that's tremendous. I really, that's what we should be doing, and should be continuing doing, getting out there on the cutting edge and doing some advanced stuff with the kids. They're more than capable of doing that. But I would think it should be part of the curriculum. Just as we have on we have an operations committee that's inclusive of, several subcommittees. You got building and grounds, you got finance and transportation, which eat up a lot of money. And whatever the needs are for technology to bolster the curriculum, that would eventually come into the finance committee, because it's going to cost money to buy software, or if you need infrastructure upgrades. I really think that's where it should be. So, that would be the foundation where it starts, and then it filters up to the finance committee to put it in the budget, or do whatever we need to do to get the funding for it. As for the security, that's another area we've made tremendous amount of progress in, chipping away at our security needs. A lot of it's been expensive to get done, and a lot has been time-consuming to get done. So I think we made a lot of progress on that. We have discussed security at the Finance and the Building and Grounds Committee, because a lot of it has to do with the buildings. And maybe we could have done a better job of publicizing some of those things that were done. But I think I'd be really careful with security of putting too much out there in the public domain for people to know what we have. I think it's important to keep the kids secure and not put too much information out there as to what we have to protect the students, our schools, and the staff within the schools.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily crazy about it being in a curriculum or another committee. I feel like sometimes we might get lost. I think there's so many other priorities and so much cleaning up that, technology is where it sort of was, or was what it was, I guess, as a result. But I'm all for, obviously it's within your purview, but all for having them meet much more often and being its own standalone committee. Security, as sort of Mariana said, it's been an ad hoc for the last 2 or 3 years, I think, maybe now.
Two, I was the first one to charge, and then you were in charge.
And I think it's, obviously, I think it's a great thing to do. It meets to your discretion to a certain degree, but I think you're right on target.
Okay, thank you. And just to kind of reiterate some of the points I'm hearing, I think, again, these can be things that can kind of slip out of sight, out of mind for us as a board, not again necessarily for the administration, but for us, they can kind of fall below our radar. So that's why I think, that these can be important. Okay, thank you.
So this we take on the one thing, as an ad hoc committee, it's going to be that. I think if you have a part of the curriculum committee, and you have an agenda for that meeting, you go on your technology, and then, the assistant superintendent, they can add in what they want to talk about, or any of the committee members. I think you have this ad hoc, when's it going to meet? Once a year, twice a year? I think you kind of force people to look at it. If you have a curriculum committee, or give it another name, so you don't diminish the other aspect. But I definitely, put it there as part of the curriculum agenda. So it has to be discussed at every committee meeting, even if it's just 1 or 2 things you're going to discuss.
My only concern about that is that, I was watching the reorg from last year, and we had a long discussion about the technology impacts the curriculum. It also there's an infrastructure element that doesn't necessarily, it's all the stuff, the backbone, right? So the idea that, you're not necessarily even covering that possibly in curriculum, that would be my only kind of concern there. But yeah, we can definitely, we can figure it out. Thank you.
Before you move on to appointments, the Lakeview and Riverview PTA meet before our next meeting.
Okay.
They meet on Thursday, January 7th. So I don't know if that's something people are willing to raise their hand, or you're willing to appoint them before that. I will put it out there that I plan on attending the Lakeview PTA meeting on Thursday night, so we will have representation at that one.
Well, and I believe last year we actually did do some of that night in reorg.
I think, yes.
So I'm happy to, the PTAs, I'm happy to, if there's volunteers. So we can start with Lakeview.
I'm willing to continue with Lakeview's representative.
Riverview is...
I'm Riverview now, but I'm happy to pass the baton.
If anybody's interested in the Riverview liaison. I've been doing Valley View, I've been enjoying it, but again, I'm also more than willing to let someone else take it.
When is Valley Views? What nights?
It's the second Tuesday of the month,
I can do that. Oh, you know what? No, I can't do that. Never mind, sorry.
and it's a 7 to 7:30. They keep it nice and short, which is convenient.
I can't commit to it.
Okay. I'll continue to take it, I'm fine with that. I did have a question about the legislative representative, and I believe this was actually brought up last year by Mrs. Lindsay. What is that?
Yeah, do we know what that is?
I took it from the last year's
And
agenda.
And in the reorg meeting, you guys had the same conversation, and you said you took it from the year before.
Yeah.
So we just don't know, I just don't know what it is.
I think it should get struck, because we don't know what it is, it obviously doesn't happen.
I don't think we had anyone do it.
And I don't know, since you just watched the reorg meeting, if I said the same thing last year that I'm about to say, which is, I don't know if the confusion came from the year before that you pulled it from, because the then superintendent knew I was the 25th legislative representative. That's not anything about Denville, that's the New Jersey School Boards has a representative from each legislative district. They appoint me, the board doesn't appoint me. So I don't know if that's where the confusion came from. So I think it probably should just get struck before the next meeting, since we don't actually know what role they would be filling.
Okay, we'll delete that.
And then I presume if you're gonna recharge security, we'll probably strike a security liaison, right? Next time there's a liaison.
Is that where, I don't know how we did it last year. Last year, at the second meeting in January, not the reorg meeting, the committee was recharged and people were appointed to it, but I don't know where the, that, you could have the representatives listed there, if you're gonna recharge the committee.
Just getting back to that legislative representative, if you get the New Jersey School Board Association newsletter periodically, they talk about certain legislation which they support, which they don't support. And I write my representatives as a citizen, not as a board member, on some of the stuff that really tweaks me the wrong way. Every now and then there's something good in there. But something, we could do, and the president's a spokesperson for the board, is occasionally write on some of these pieces of legislation. Some of them are just costing the school boards a lot of money. You take a look at some of the stuff that was passed, even though the New Jersey School Board Association supported it, just about anything and everything you do costs money. It's a new program, you got to train the principals, you got to train the staff. It's money. It's money. They're costing us a fortune. The legislature right now, for every $1,000, I'm estimating, it was something like what, they cut spending $1,000, they increase spending $2,000. So it's really difficult to run a school district these days with the lack of state aid and plus all these unfunded mandates. And nothing's been done over the last 6 years since Christie took over. We wrote that letter about looking at the unfunded mandates. Assemblyman Bucco sent it down to Trenton to the lieutenant governor, who's had this committee to look at all the unfunded mandates for municipalities. Zero's been done. So I just think that you don't want to consume our lives, but occasionally we should discuss some of these issues, the impact, and fire off a letter to our representatives, whether we like it or not, especially the stuff that's going to cost us money and it's not funded.
I would agree with you, and the more people that are vocal, the better. That's the way it works when, the legislators hear from us. And you're absolutely right, Mr. Cass. We as individuals can write by our bylaws. Our board president is our spokesperson. And, in the past, I think we have discussed as a group and asked the board president to write things. And, we can be more vocal about asking the board president to write on our behalf when we as a group feel charged up about something. I think that's well within our purview. To make, write
And
another letter.
I am more than happy to do
And
that.
make phone calls.
I could do that too. As far as these other liaisons, if there's anything that is of interest to you that you would like to be on, please also include that when you email me. In terms of some information for our new member, the Board to Board is a meeting that occurs every 2 months or so,
Maybe more like.
maybe every quarterly
Yeah.
at Morris Hills, and it's a
3 times?
Yeah, met 3 times.
It met 3 times last year.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not a big commitment.
right.
And we send 3 board members,
Right, from each board in Morris County. So, the negotiations, obviously, is, I think somewhat explanatory, the negotiations committees. The delegate assembly, Mrs. Lindsay, could you give a little background on that?
Sure, that is, every board in the state of New Jersey sends a representative to it, and that's actually where, as boards, we vote on what we want our New Jersey School Board representatives to lobby on our behalf about. So it sort of is a legislative arm too. Not really, you're not directly doing it, but that's where they go and they vote. So any board can send in a resolution that they'd like the New Jersey School Boards to lobby on, and then representatives from all the boards vote on whether or not that should be on the agenda of the New Jersey School Boards.
That should be the foundation of Denville, I'm guessing, right? Denville
Yep.
Foundation, which is the not-for-profit organization which raises money for various projects in the schools, obviously some of the stuff that you see around us. The Municipal Alliance, I'm actually not clear what that is. Can anybody help me there?
Is it still a functioning?
It's a committee, it's a town committee. It's mostly for, really for drug and alcohol awareness, but also other things about healthy living, kind of.
Okay.
Pretty much. But the genesis of it was to do with alcohol and drugs, and the funding comes from actual seizures of properties from drug busts.
Okay. And it's an organization that meets?
It meets, it's a township committee.
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually county funds to the tune of, I don't know, 15,000, where they use it for programs in schools and stuff.
Okay. And the Pride Council, I believe, Mr. Anderson, were you our liaison last year?
Yes.
For Pride Council?
Yeah, it's kind of a ad hoc committee within the town that has a bunch of different representatives from both, town organizations, town council, the mayor's typically at the meeting. It also includes different neighborhood areas, some people, representatives from the baseball, soccer, all sorts of different organizations, and they do a tremendous amount of work and with just advocating for certain things going on in the town, the river cleanup and things like that. I typically have gone and just given updates on what's going on with the board, and they've always been very appreciative on kind of getting to know what's happening with the board and what's going on with the students in the schools. So it's been an enjoyable committee to be on.
Great. And the Recreation Committee is the Town Recreation Committee. And that's,
I'll do that again, so I'm on that and the Mayor's Sports Council.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Cass.
kill two birds with one stone.
Thank you very much.
We left off CPAC, probably because we didn't have CPAC the year before. If we want, we can add CPAC, and you can
Yeah,
have a
thank you
delegate.
very much. Okay, if there's no further discussions here, I'd like to move on to the appointments. Mr. Napoloni, would you care to move us through the appointments?
All of them? Well, how about this? Unless there is a objection, I'm going to move items 1,
1, 2, 3.
is it all, that's it? Yeah. 1, 2, and 3, which, as I very, very quickly paraphrase, identifies our auditing company, our insurance brokers, I believe our attorneys, our architects, things of that sort. It also,
On number 3, you want to insert a name.
So it goes through different officers within the school district and coordinators that are made up of our administrators. There is the bid threshold in there, and then number 3, to insert the name Dino Capello as board president, and some of the signatures that are needed for some of the accounts within the school district.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Just a couple quick questions. And Mr. Forte, you probably noticed, or possibly Damaris. On number 2, the bid threshold and the quote threshold, I noticed it's different from last year, but I also noticed the effective date is changed. So I'm assuming that the state made that change?
The state made that change July 1st, 2015, to increase the bid threshold for qualifying purchasing agent.
Okay. So, and then the only other question I have was on 3 for the signatures. I noticed some of the signatures were changed from last year, particularly payroll agency, 2 signatures as opposed to 1. Is that just something that we're changing as far as policies?
We are changing forward. I discussed this with the auditor, and 1 signature is not enough.
Okay.
It's
Good.
more for security reasons. I requested 2 signatures, and he was fine with that.
Especially on the milk fund, it's very important to have 2 signatures.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions?
I just had a comment. You know, it's a done deal for this go-around, but would there be any benefit in shopping around our broker for the health benefits? You know, next time around, we've had RHM for a long, long time. We've had some ups and downs with them over the years, especially in terms of the pricing. And one year, we had to spend a lot of time arm wrestling with them to get the premium increase down, which eventually happened. So I just think that, you know, it's, from my perspective, it's something that we just do every year. I'm just wondering if there's somebody else out there that might do a better job for us from a pricing standpoint, and then also maybe from, you know, bringing some other options to the table.
Yeah, I might be wrong, but I think that they are on as of record at this moment, but we can always go throughout the year and reevaluate that and interview and investigate other brokers or architects or auditors or anything.
And
Really.
that's one of my open items to do for this year, to do
Okay.
an RFP for the health insurance broker and for, it's just good at least every 3-4 years, just to send an RFP, just to compare insurance, health insurance, liability insurance, and any other professional services, including auditors, just to compare what we have currently or to what we can have in the future.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have people that we trust and we work well with. You know, you have
Absolutely.
you develop a relationship with them over the years. But that's one that just, you know, has stuck out in my mind every year when we go through this. Not so much the other ones that we're doing business with.
Okay. All right, anybody else? Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lure?
Yes?
Mrs. DeLuna?
Yes?
Mrs. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes?
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Napadoni?
Yep.
Mr. Capello?
Yes. Okay. We'll move on to the adoption of the meeting calendar. Mariana, would you care to move us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I would like to move that we adopt the attached list of board meetings.
Do we know if, second?
Yeah, I was going to say, so now that it's been seconded, who seconded it? Nate?
Mr.
Thank
Navalny,
you.
seconded?
I had a question on it, and I don't know normally if we've already adopted the district calendar, but I noticed, and I believe this happened this year also, that right now we have scheduled basically, what is it, the second and fourth Mondays unless there's a holiday. And for the second Monday in October, it is Columbus Day, and this year we took off from school. Do you plan on having us off from school? Does anybody have a problem with meeting on a night? It always seemed odd to me when we close the schools and we don't allow other people to use our buildings to hold a board meeting for ourselves. We'll open the building for ourselves, but not for others.
Well, the buildings are open this year, the buildings would be open next year. It was a day off for students, but not for
Not
staff.
for staff, because, okay.
Next year, because of the way the Jewish holidays fall, my proposal is to move that day till November anyway, because they didn't want to have a Monday off and a Wednesday off, because you
Okay.
have the Jewish holiday. So it really shouldn't be a problem.
It shouldn't be a problem. Okay. I just wanted to, that was the only one that I saw fell on something that I thought would be a,
I was going to ask a question about the Foundation Denville golf outing that seems to always be on that.
I actually was
true.
going to send Judy an email, but they're traditionally the third Monday in September, and we happen to be the second and fourth.
Let it be known that we talked about it then.
Yes, I know, because I wanted us not to have to change it, and when I look traditionally, because I'm sure it's already booked, they book it the night of
The previous one.
the previous one.
Yeah.
And they try and always be that third Monday. So when we weren't that third Monday, I'm like, oh, we might be in the clear this
I'll
week.
shoot them a message and ask.
Yeah.
Do we have any concern about the August 15th to September 26th gap in terms of any hiring decisions? I know this came up last year. In terms of-
I believe we just passed a policy that would allow for the administrator
Right.
to
We're
hire
okay.
in a,
Okay,
Well, you
It's
could
better.
vote on the 12th anyhow, September
right,
12th.
agreed.
I mean,
We've always had that
it's-
gap,
It's
though.
pretty close to what we had. We did do an emergency meeting, but now that we passed that policy, we wouldn't have to do that.
Right.
Okay.
So it should be okay.
And up until 2 years ago, there was only one meeting a month anyway, right?
There was always only one meeting a month in July and August, in all
Yeah,
my
but
years
it's
on the
like,
board.
the rest of the months were,
Oh, that one.
We only did that
holiday.
for 1 year.
And that's not revisit that one, though. That was,
Yeah. And I mean, I know that December is a very hard month, and so that's new. This year, we did the one meeting a month in December.
Okay.
Okay, so if everybody's good with that, I'm sorry. Then I have no other comments about it.
Okay, if everyone's good with that, any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lure?
Yes.
Mrs. DeLuna?
Yes,
Mrs. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Napoloni?
yes.
Mr. Anderson?
yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Before we move on, I was just looking at the bolding of Valley View School, jumped out at me. So 2 years, the bolding of the lettering. So 2 years ago, we were in Riverview. This year, obviously, we were in Valley View. Would it make sense for us to move to Lakeview for the
Oh,
sake
I
of?
so think it would make complete and utter sense.
I mean, for the sake of the community, I know Mashpee, I mean, right? It would be much more, I'm just saying from a
I
community
don't think they have
perspective,
tables that would fit this lovely skirt.
we could figure that part out. Just saying that if we're trying to balance where we are within the district so people can come and see us, we might want to consider Lakeview.
I think that's an excellent idea, though not practical, because their library, I don't believe, has this much space, and their tables are round, not
We could be in the community
rectangular.
room, or it could be in the all-purpose room.
Okay, well, I'm all about moving it closer
Something to consider.
closer
I
to
think it's
other
a-
people in the community.
Right,
Close to the center of town.
yeah,
Well, that would be back to Riverview.
yeah, but the other side of town.
We talked about that. I think it's worth something we're certainly looking at.
All right, there
It
you
does make
go.
a lot of sense.
Food for thought.
If it can work physically.
Yeah, it's too late. We already adopted the public meeting
That's
calendar
true.
says it. But, I mean, yes, I will go on record, I don't have a problem with moving it as long as it's consistently moved. I don't like it rotating around.
No, we
That's
can't do that.
confusing.
That's a
No,
shell.
no, no, that's for the year. is what I would
That's a
do.
shell game. We're not, if it's
No.
going to be for a year,
Yeah.
it would be for a year.
And I don't know that we should take Steve's opinion, since it would be too far for him. We would have to take, Sandy might be a little bit closer there, right? We could take Sandy's vote on that one.
I'm a little closer.
Okay, if there's nothing else, at this time, I will open up for public comment at 8:12 PM. If there's anybody from the public that would like to make a comment, please approach the podium and sign in and just announce your name and address for the record. Anyone? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public portion at 8:13. And moving on to new business, we have one item for action to be taken. Mrs. DeLuna, would you care to move us through the finance?
sure. We have one motion for vote, resolved that the Board of Ed approves student ID 20231061 to attend Calais School effective January 7 at a prorated fee of $35,100 for the remaining school year 2015-16.
I'll second.
This was one of the ones we talked about in committee.
This is the one we talked about, I said this was the imminent one.
Any questions or comments? No? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lauer?
I'm going to
No?
abstain from this because I don't know anything about it.
Mrs. DeLuna?
Yes,
Mrs. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Napoloni?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes. Okay. Good of the cause, I don't think do you have any correspondence to review?
No.
I don't know if this falls under good of the cause, I don't see it as a discussion item. I see we're going to do code of ethics like we always do on reorg night later. But are we going to talk about the school lunches that you told us to be prepared? Not you, Mr. Forte told us to be prepared.
I had it in my superintendent's comments, but if you want to talk about it now, it's fine.
No, that's fine. I just came prepared. I'll be prepared whenever it is we speak about it. I just didn't want the meeting to go away and
Yep.
Thank you.
Good pen. Come on.
Do I take this or do you take this?
do you want it read into the, or we just read it silently to ourselves?
It's a long, we can all review and read it to our own and then sign it on the back, the acknowledgement on the back. Unless we all want to read it together,
Well, does it need to be read into the record?
not necessarily, no.
Because I'm happy to read it into the record.
It's a review.
next meeting.
We can all review it and sign the back acknowledgement.
Okay.
Okay, and just for the public, this is something that we review annually, and that reorganize typically the night that we review the ethics, and obviously you'll sign off.
Correct.
Well, some of us, this is not our second time signing it. You're welcome. I didn't look at closely.
Just before we move on to superintendent's comments, unless anyone else has anything, two things. One, Steve, if you could just give us maybe a quick recap of where we are in terms of the budget, and I know we're getting into budget season, and you can tell us a little bit about your plans. Was that in the remarks? Just kind of where we stand and where you expect to be in the next few weeks?
So the budget, we're working on it right now with the administration, and we're looking at that spreadsheet I provided you with the buildings and grounds projects that are going to be required. We're not at the point where we're ready to present a budget or pass along a budget at any, at this particular time, because we're still reviewing it. What would you think, Damaris, in terms of, for a finance
Timeline?
meeting?
Next finance meeting, are we going to have one in January? We should be able to discuss them during finance meeting if we're having one, yes.
Preliminary discussion in January, if there's a committee together and ready to go in January.
We have most of the details in the budget by now. We're just trying to tighten up little open items and reviewing them. And like I said, we should have a rough draft by the next finance committee.
So we have a Monday in between the 11th and the 25th. What do you want to do? I don't know, Mondays or Tuesdays or whenever the committee is meeting.
That's Martin Luther King Day, but we
That's actually,
can pick a weekday. We can pick a weekday
Okay, but I mean, can you do it that week instead of, we normally do it before?
before the work session.
Yeah.
This is not going to happen now, so we'll do it in between, sometime before the 25th.
good. Okay, thank you.
I have one good of the cause, which you're, so maybe this is for Mariana. So you are, according to the ethics thing, you're now eligible again. Your sister, unless she's we believe that we have 5 non-conflicted members that could serve on negotiations.
I mean, it changed, like,
Yes.
the steady state
Yes,
of New
like Merry
Jersey, the shifting
Christmas.
Santa.
Yes.
Oh, I had not read that it shifted.
And.
So now it's back to having to have somebody live in your house?
Yeah, but if they're not in your house but are active on negotiations for wherever they are, so that would be the question. But not so much to serve per se, but I think the next meeting, we're going to talk, we want to have
Well,
a
that's
scope of what we can negotiate in good faith. So we need the will of the majority, and so.
Well, that's nice if we have a majority of the board non-conflicted.
So one of the January meetings, like we used to do, where we have like a closed session and just get some boundaries, like share the notes and, look at.
I am unaware of her serving. I can try and find that out.
It's caged, yeah, if you really hate the idea, whenever they used to walk out, you could be one of them, or you could stick it out, it's up to you.
Those are the
Okay.
days.
Thank you. I thank you
Yes,
for
and
updating.
Don is in that same boat, so it's his
Yes, he
daughter
and I
who
got-
no longer lives in the home, so she's not really a problem unless she's a shark at the table or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good news. And I think the recommendation from the school board rep was obviously to just roll all this by our board council to make sure of all this. But the indications
That is
are,
their
the
common
indications
disclaimer.
are.
Anything-
Yes, that is always the last line in any legal advice you get from New
Subject to
Jersey
change?
school boards. No,
Yeah, this-
run this by
Make sure
your
Your-
board
your
attorney to
paid
make sure they
attorney.
agree.
Yeah.
Because, no lawyer wants to contradict some other lawyer's purview.
Okay, anything else? Mr. Forte, you're up.
Okay, question, things that are coming up and we need to talk about and move on. We've been speaking about that spreadsheet of the B and G items probably since October. So we're at the point where we need to make a decision. Our roofing consultant and our architect both concur that waiting is not good because of the cost of the project will go up due to the fact that the people have more jobs booked. Made sense to me, and, there are experts that we hire. So I'm going to have a resolution on, unless the board wants to vote no or wants to say that they're not in support of it now, of a roofing project of a cost of $1.2 million for Lakeview and for Valley View School. And remember, some of that has been reduced due to the fact that we were able to get some of the work done through a warranty. And this is obviously an estimated cost. We would like to use capital reserve to start, but we may build in some money into the budget. So we want to get started on this process so we can actually hire the architect to go out to bid, and then the funding can change, and it most likely will change. We most likely will put some of this into the budget, even as a lease, because we could lease the roof actually for 5 years. So we might want to take a $1.2 million project, maybe do the part that's this school, which is about $500,000, maybe lease this 5 years, over 5 years, which would be somewhere in the $120,000 range per year. That might be a sound idea. But just to get the ball rolling, because we have the money in the bank, and it comes down to the fact, again, that when you have leaky roofs, if you have the money, I think it's silly to sit on the money if you have the money. And we have these roofs that have failed, and it's time to make a decision on it and to do it. So it's not really the way I wanted to do it. I thought about having it on the agenda for December, but I felt like it was probably smarter to just wait until this meeting, talk about it, and then on the 11th have it as a resolution to vote on so that we can get started.
Just for the public, in case they don't understand, when you say lease a roof, that doesn't mean we'll give it back. It means
Right.
we'll pay for it over 5 years, you said?
It's a lease purchase agreement.
Just so those of us there,
So it's a
It will be-
finance
it will be-
arrangement.
it's a
Yes.
finance arrangement that we pay for it over multiple years, and it's always ours. We don't.
Correct. We don't have to return it.
Good point, you're right.
Oh, when you talk about leasing a roof, like, okay.
Yeah, you're right.
After 3 years.
Take it off.
I've had people in the, public ask before when we talked about leasing buses and stuff like that. It's not like when
Right.
you lease a car in your life.
And just to clarify something you said in the beginning, just so it's clear, you want to move quickly because, and I know we discussed this in one of the committees, because if we get somebody now, it would be a less expensive option than obviously waiting until they're busy until the high season.
Our architect and roofing consultant feel like it could be a matter of as much as $3-4 a square foot less if we get out in front of the curve, because once the contractors start building up their book for the summer, because this is summer work, they, obviously their price goes up.
We had a lot of large prior projects, especially roofs, that were very problematic from getting them done on time because of weather and other delays, and we were way too late getting our required paperwork done. There's a lot of paperwork that has been done with the state and everything, all this approval process, so it behooves us to get this done sooner rather than later, because once you get into the spring and the early summer, all the schools are contracted to have work done, and it's very difficult to find people and get it done on a timely basis. So this is great that we could push this out there now rather than waiting.
Our architects and engineers have already been on site and are ready to go. They just need the approval. They need to see that this has been approved by the board so that they can realize that there's going to be funding behind it. And that's it. We're ready to move on it if the board's ready to go on it.
The state's no longer doing the 40%.
No, the ROD grants are gone. The only way you can get to 40% is if you pass a referendum to bond the money, and then they'll pay 40% of the actual debt service payment each year. Meaning, if you have a $400,000 debt service payment, they'll pay 40% of that. So somewhere in the $175,000 range, I guess.
On this lease purchase, that's going to be for the Valley View portion or for the whole, both groups?
Probably, I'll tell you, the reason why we wouldn't want to lease all of it is because it's a pretty big chunk of money that goes towards your cap. You know what I mean? Like, say, if we leased $1.2 million and it comes out to be $400,000 a year, or $300,000 a year, $350,000, that's a pretty big chunk of our 2% tax increase. Because that, when you lease these roofs, other than if you pass the bond for it, when you lease it, it goes towards your cap. It's in your budget. It's not outside your budget where your debt service is. So you have to be wary of driving that number up too high. But also, I'm also sensitive to depleting, the reserves much further than we'd like. So I think a good compromise, and the reason why I chose Valley View is this is a little cheaper. It'll probably somewhere in the $450,000 range for the section of roof that they need to do. So if we leased that one and paid out of capital reserve for the one at Lakeview, that might be a good idea. By the way, for the record, the Riverview roof was done just about 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I think 3 years ago. So that's why we're not discussing Riverview, because their roof is new.
And we're not even talking about the entire roof, we're talking about only portions, right?
Sections.
Yeah, I don't want to get into too much detail on the budget, but this is a big money project. Have we heard from the town as to the St. Clair's property taxes? That's going to be some additional monies coming into the municipal coffers and ours also. Is that going to happen like within the next 12 months?
For this next budget, you're going to use that to build off of it.
According to Mrs. Klein, they don't have any updated numbers as of right now. I spoke to her again, and she still don't have updated numbers, so we don't have those numbers as of now.
Other than what we saw in the newspaper.
Before our budget's finalized.
Okay. But we will see some money from that in 2016?
She's not committing to anything right now. She's not revealing any information that we can say if we will or we're not.
Okay.
I can tell you that the mayor at the reorganization meeting acknowledged that the town was going to have additional money, so therefore we could assume, and you know what that word
Well, let's
means.
not assume that, let's extrapolate.
That we would have it. But he did indicate that in this fiscal budget that they would have St. Clair's coming on the books, so.
Any other questions about this capital reserve roofing project?
The only thing I would ask is, while we're talking with the architect and while we're looking at contracts, can we look at the possibility of performance guarantees? Because of the timeliness issues, is there a way to build in performance guarantees where if they finish on day X, they get something, if they finish on day Y, they get something less? Do we ever do that, and is that something?
All the projects last time had that in it.
Okay, good, okay. So
Basically, they lose a certain percentage
if
each
they go
time.
over
Yeah.
by, okay.
I don't know that they.
Yeah, we held back the incremental payments on some of the vendors because they were not meeting their.
It's not as good as it sounds, though, to be honest with you. It really isn't. In actuality, it doesn't work as good as, from saying it and having it on paper, it seems like a good idea. I'm not saying we wouldn't put it in there. I just don't want you to think that it's like the greatest be-all, end-all. It doesn't work as well as you think, because the other guys, they just book so much work. And I'm not saying these guys, like, we may not get that. Maybe we have a different person that does it. But a lot of times, they just book so much work that they're already on to the next job, and they don't really worry about your 40, 50,000 that their letters lost. Sometimes you get them back, but it doesn't speed them up as fast as you would think.
Well, but if we have that money to finish a job or make repairs if something isn't done right, I mean, to me, then that would be wonderful.
And also.
It's just the legal fees, the legal cost.
Yeah.
I'm not putting it down. I just want you to know, like, if this is October next year and we're sitting around going, well, what happened to those performance things? By the time you go to court and all the legal things to actually hold the money back, I mean, you got, before I got here, the board was involved in a squabble with the last roofing contractor from Riverview. It didn't really work in our favor. I mean, I think in the end, we ended up maybe not giving them something like $5,000 or $6,000, on $1 million job, somewhere along those lines. So we'll put them in there, we'll have it in there, but I don't want everybody to think that it's ironclad.
And when the architect puts this out for bid, we want to make sure we don't use the roofer that did this, that we had all the problems with.
Well-
Because we used them
Yeah,
twice,
sure.
and we had problems on every job with them. They were I think, the lowest bid, but it was a lot of high maintenance.
All right, the next thing, if nobody has any other questions about that, is the free lunch document that I disseminated this week, and we talked about for a while. We're in the process of doing a couple things with this. So right now, we have 71 students district-wide identified that are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Those students are being provided lunch sometimes, depending on which PTA does what, at some of the time, sometimes for a lesser cost, sometimes for free. It varies throughout the district. So one of the things Damaris and I have been working on, Damaris is working with Morris Hills Regional, is seeing if we could purchase lunches from them on a daily basis, build in the costs that are associated, meaning the travel and the personnel costs to get the lunches from one place to another. Morris Hills Regional is interested in doing this with us. Their cost would be $2.85 per lunch per day, per student. We would, at this point, I would not recommend anything other than a cold lunch due to the fact we don't have any of the equipment to handle a hot lunch, because there's laws and codes about how hot things have to be remaining. We would have to put out a fairly large amount of money for these warming trays, and probably even a van that could keep them warm on the way. And so we're at the point right now where we're looking to buy these lunches. We do have to make sure that there aren't any other kids that qualify first. So the 71 number is where we think we're at, but it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less. As a matter of fact, I'll say it's not going to be less, it could be a little bit more, but we're pretty close to the number. We will most likely need to purchase a refrigerator for Lakeview only, not for Riverview or Valley View, to the fact that that Valley View has one already that has space. Riverview only needs 6 lunches, and Lakeview has about 47 lunches that need to be provided every day, and we're going to need a place to put them in the refrigerator. So we're working on all these things now. We're hoping that we're going to have this in place by the 1st of February. There'll be a resolution maybe on for the 11th. We'd like to probably move it on to the 11th so that if we wait till the 25th, it's really getting to be too close to get this thing off the ground. We want to inform the parents. There will be some choice. They will have a choice of different meals that are cold, though. Again, we won't have the warm. That's the short-term plan of trying to fix this. The long-term plan is to look at joining the free and reduced lunch program for next year, which would be a totally different way of doing it, meaning all the lunches would be provided to the students. They would have to pay, obviously. The people who are free and reduced lunch would get a free or reduced lunch. The costs that are associated with the upstart would be passed on to the cost of the lunches for the people who are paying. All PTA lunches would have to cease. There would be no more PTA lunch. There is a way for them to get involved in this, though, where they can be involved in some of the labor, which they're doing already, meaning passing out the lunches and things. So there is a way for us to work with the PTAs on trying to help them with some of this. But I think with the scope that we're talking about, if we were sitting here with 20 kids maybe, I don't know if I would be this interested in really moving on this, because I think we could handle it the way we're doing it. But I think with this scope of kids that we're talking about, and the fact that some of them aren't getting it every day, some are only getting it once a week, some are getting it 3 days a week, I think the right thing to do is to move on the free and reduced lunch program, regardless of the negative ramifications that are going to come from the people not being able to provide the PTA lunches at as high of a profit as they have right now.
So can you send us information on what that looks like?
That's next year's thing. So,
But can you send us information?
well, we're working on all that. This is to get through right now, because we saw a need And we want to have something ready to go on February 1st. We're nowhere near ready to move on the free and reduced lunch program at
I
this time.
understand that, but before we could comment on it, I'd like to understand it, because I don't think I understand it from the description right now.
Okay, so the free and reduced lunch program would also be something we do through Morris Hills Regional. We don't have a kitchen anywhere,
So
so
does
we
that
would
mean
purchase
that
them from
then
them.
There will be no more PTA fundraiser lunch program? I mean,
As it
your
is
goal
now.
a service, as
Right.
it is now. The district would take on all lunches, and I'm quite sure right now, I know at least 2 of the 3 PTAs are struggling to get volunteers in there serving it. You're not going to have parents stepping up when it's a district purview, I don't think. But, and whatever, there is profit in
There's
the
profit.
lunches to kids that don't qualify to free and
Correct.
reduced lunch to the district, and no profit in the other. It
Right.
becomes a district.
Well, the USDA subsidizes this. U.S. Department of Agriculture comes through the state. So it's no longer a burden on the district. There are some upfront costs, like, to manage this amount of lunches. Right now, to manage 71, we would just use one of our vans, like one of our extra buses. One of the bus drivers will go up and get it. But to manage 300-400 lunches, it would be a whole different area. So you'd need a van, you'd need a worker or 2, you'd need these warming trays. So there's some upfront costs, but the code is there that these lunches cannot go in the red. So it always has to at least break even. So everything we do would have to make sure we break even. So the Maris is still in contact with them, with the Morris Hills, and they work with a company called Pomptonian, which is a big lunch service throughout the state. And we'll see how this goes if we're ready to move on this. And even if we qualify, we may not qualify, but if we do, I think that we have to seriously consider this.
And as you get down the road in the process of looking at this, will you meet with the combined council or the PTA? I mean, they're the ones that have the better idea of how many lunches are bought.
I have a meeting with them next week, actually. And lunches are going to be a big part of the agenda.
And right now, I know that some of the schools are only offering kids 1 day a week lunch, or 3 days, and one is doing all 5 days with a small charge. Do they all have the ability for parents to purchase lunches 5 days a week?
I know for Riverview you do, and I know Valley View you
and
do.
Lakeview do.
Right.
Okay, so I didn't know, I mean, it's still quite a large cost, and I didn't know if paying Morris Hills is any less expensive than if we funded what the PTAs were doing right now by their own cost analysis. I know that it's only 3 days in one school and 1 day in the other, so I couldn't extrapolate out the math.
The thing is, some of the lunches, they're cheap, but they're only like a bagel. We would provide it has to have a well-balanced square meal according to the USDA standard. So it wouldn't just be a bagel, it would be, right, in other words, one of the lunches at Lakeview is just a bagel. Ours would be, you get a sandwich, you get a fruit, and you would get a milk with it.
You have to go.
I thought by whatever, I mean, I've been off the lunch rotation for many years now, thankfully, but in all the lunch wars that I lived through, I didn't think as a school district, when we passed what was lovingly called the cupcake policy, I didn't think the school district could give kids just a starch meal.
Well, the PTA is, though.
If you're going to go in the free and reduced lunch program, there's some, and you guys know this, there's some very strict guidelines. as
No,
to
I
what the meals
understand
have
that,
to
but
be.
I mean, our head nurse, I've sat in PTA meetings where they discuss what our head nurse will allow them to serve as lunches. I'm surprised that a bagel is cutting the.
But I know.
Yeah, but
I
you can
know
get
it's simply-
Mozzarella sticks now.
It might be cutting it because we are not in the program right now. So for us, it's
Yeah.
okay just to
Getting
give
No,
them
I
a
understand we're
bagel.
not breaking the law. I'm just surprised after what I've heard, spoken about in PTA meetings, of what Mrs. Sasso will allow, and I actually came out on the other direction. Once you make the lunch too healthy, the kids aren't going to purchase it, they're just going to bring in their junk from home, if that's what they're used to. So. okay.
So what we have here is a cost of somewhere around 30, what did I say down here? $36,000.
Yeah, that's what you said.
And we have about $8,300 in federal funds that we could use for that. We also, when you add in the labor and the transportation and all that, we would be short somewhere around $13,000. So we're
That would
looking.
be for this half year.
Right, for the half year. So we are looking at some help with, from the township.
Let's stop for 1 second, I'm sorry. But I remember when we were going through this, we were talking about, one school offers 1 day of lunch, right? Do we know, does that mean the other 4 days they're not getting lunch?
Yeah.
Are we basically saying that we're okay with that? Because I wouldn't be okay with that. If we're
No,
gonna fund it.
I'm not okay. I like looking at the Morris Hills Regional, and I assume since some kids bring their lunch from home and some kids buy it, you won't be singling kids out that they look different because it's coming in from a different vendor than all the other vendor lunches. I don't like
Well,
kids.
this year it will.
That's sort of my concern, and I'm trying to justify in my own mind, well, it's okay, because some kids come in a brown bag, and some kids come in a lunchbox, and this one has a thermos, so these ones come in the little foil trays from whatever Bensi or whatever the vendor is of the day, and the ones from the high school look different, but there's so much difference that kids won't feel singled out. That's why I asked, if all schools offer lunches 5 days a week, and if the district is putting up, the money, and it's the same money either way, but you're saying it's not, I'd rather not have kids look stigmatized.
Yeah, my question, Mark, is that we're talking about $36,000 to match what is happening now. But if we're providing lunches for...
No, 36,000 total for lunches every day for 1 year.
Right.
Just does not include labor or transportation costs, is what he wrote in the email to us. So that's every
That's for the
day.
full
That's
year.
5 days a week.
So for
that's
half the year,
every kid.
$18,200.
So it's every kid, every day,
Right.
not 1 day.
All
or 3 days a
71
week.
kids, 5 days a week, or whatever days we're in school.
Okay.
Not including its startup cost.
And there is a cost of $4,400 for labor and transportation. I added that in. That is not some kind of a made-up number. It's the actual number that would cost for us to have.
Okay,
the
and now
bus
I
driver
understand
up
the
there.
aid. I thought the aid was a person, not...
Yeah, I shouldn't have put the
that's-
E at the end. It's the wrong
Yeah,
wrong
okay.
E.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, why do we have to pay a person for this too? Okay.
So just to be totally straight, this year, for February through June, yes, the only kids getting this lunch would be the free and reduced kids. So it would have that idea that this is a special lunch. So what we are going to do this week, and I'm not sure how far we are along with this, but the schools are going to call each one of these parents and tell them what we're doing, and if they're interested in it. And, if we come back and 71 people and 20 of them say they're interested and the rest don't, maybe we reevaluate this, But we have to, I don't want to have this whole thing and then I find out, nobody really wants the lunch because, there's a stigma. From what I was told through you, meaning the two board members at the end, right? And also from the PTA, that some of the kids don't have lunch. Like, they don't come to school without lunch, and they're giving them peanut butter sandwiches and things like this. So, I would love to be able to do this differently as fast as we could, but I just don't see us being able to get this off the ground at the extent that we would like to do, where it would reduce that stigma, if you want to say that, there's 400 lunches and 71 of them are this lunch, nobody will know. But yeah, these 71 kids are going to get this lunch, and no one else will.
I got a question. Since they're calling people, we want to make sure all these kids get their nourishment. It's very, very important, scholastically, for their health. But, we got a lot of safety nets out there. I know Denville Social Services has a food pantry down there. They do a great job helping families out. The community has done a tremendous job helping families out when they've been in need because of personal tragedy, catastrophes, et cetera. So when they talk to these parents, and they probably don't have the answer, it's a rhetorical question. Why are they coming to school without lunch? They're out of food in the house, and that goes into, what about dinner time? Are these kids getting dinner where social services could help out? And so that's a concern of mine. They're getting, something to eat at night when they get home, besides having something in school. So that really concerns me that, it's just the Band-Aid when more is needed for some of these kids. And now we find out some of these kids are not coming to school because they don't have lunch. I guess they're too embarrassed to go to the nurse's office for the peanut butter sandwich. That's really bad. So what's going on with these parents in terms of, are they doing the best they can? Is more intervention needed by social services? I know we don't have the answers, but those are, to me, are really key questions before, I think it's important we do something for the kids, but I just, I think there's a bigger picture here that we're missing. When a kid stays home from school because they don't have lunch, they don't have, can't make a sandwich or something to eat at school, and then we have they're getting stigmatized because some of them are going to get a free lunch and some of them are too embarrassed. I just, it's tragic, but I'm just wondering what's going on at home.
Well, I think if it turns out that this is not going to go over well with the majority of the parents, then we look at a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
My problem with it is, and do we want to pay the PTAs to provide a bagel for a kid? I don't know if that's substantial enough, whereas this is going to be more of a substantial meal for them. And if they're not getting a dinner, like you say, appropriate dinner done at home, at least if we can send them with a balanced lunch, maybe it's better.
Yeah, as difficult as it is, I mean, have one of those oath discussions, open and honest and frank with the parent, your kid to come to school, or they're coming to school without lunch, what's going on? How can we help you? Have we come to some type of solution? And find out what's going on in the house. Maybe it's just a dysfunctional family, and they don't give they don't care, or they just can't, get down to Denville Social Services. They can't get these social interactions that are needed to prop up the family. I don't know, but it just, this is like a half-baked solution to me. What's going on with each and individual family, that kid that can't come to school with lunch, and are they being fed at night, and are they getting some type of breakfast before they come to school?
Maybe we can ask, and I don't know, I would imagine it's you, Steve, that we should ask. I mean, I believe probably I don't know what they're called now, our guidance counselors, our school counselors, maybe that's what they're called now. I mean, they might have a better handle on this, and I don't know who's going to be making the phone calls, if it's them, or if it's going to be
Depending on
the secretaries. I don't know who's going to be making the calls, the nurse. But through those dialogues, maybe we can get a better handle on it. I know that, from time being a parent in different buildings in this district, that they run programs for disadvantaged families where they collect stuff, and it goes directly back to Denville families and all. So I know that our counselors try and do things for the families that they know are in desperate need within their own school building. So they might have a better handle on this. So maybe, Steve, while you're gathering this information, if you try and, help us understand.
Whatever we're doing is not enough.
Well, no, it's
It's not
obviously, and
obviously.
we're not doing anything as a board, and we're not aware of what's being done in the building. So maybe while he's gathering this information, if you could also gather that, I know for certain one of the buildings does a whole thing around, and I know they switched what they did this year because it was reported out at a PTA meeting, the big switch in how they were helping around the holidays for, those bigger meals and gifts and things like that, so.
Yeah, I think Steve, if you're talking about somebody reaching out to the parents individually and finding out kind of what their take is on this and if they're interested, certainly maybe having that conversation with social services beforehand and understanding, at least giving them a contact to kind of, they either don't know about it, they don't want to take advantage of it for whatever reason, or, but if they don't know about it, that's an easy one for us to kind of help with, right? I mean, that's an easy one for us to say, hey, we can give you some contact, we've spoken to the town, they're willing to help out in these types of situations. At least that's probably at least a step one that we can help out with in one way, shape, or form.
As a matter of fact, the mayor and administrator have agreed to bring this to the town council to have help us with to defray some of these costs through social services.
I'm going to comment that, remember that free and reduced, that many of the students that may qualify for this list just qualify for reduced lunches, not necessarily that they're to the point where they do not have a lunch at all. And the one situation where the student wasn't coming, it was an awareness factor, and after one time, the parent and principal worked it out, and the student has had lunch every day since. The one time didn't come. It was just awareness of what we offer.
I would think all these families are available for SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, right? So is that not enough?
Milk?
I don't,
Just give milk, that's all, that's our,
I just,
that's all we have.
are we doing all we can?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see after you have the conversation with the PTA president, just to understand what their take is. I think, I guess the only other potential solution I see here, and I'm glad we're looking at it, because I think that we should be looking at it with the amount of students that are qualified for free or reduced lunch. The other potential solution would be, if the PTA is interested in it, is going to the parents and asking for people to help. I mean, this town helps out in unbelievable situations and gives thousands of dollars for people who need it. And I think if we reached out, that's another potential, but it's, quickly doing the math, you're talking, you have 36 here, I just did the math real quick, you're talking somewhere between $30,000 and $36,000 a year to supplement 5 days a week for these students. It's a lot of money on a year after year basis to maintain, but it's also a big fundraisers for each one of the PTAs, and I'm concerned a little bit that the PTAs are gonna be, I know they're always looking for ways to kind of get more money. I don't know what their numbers are for how much they're making off these lunches. I gotta imagine it's pretty decent, so.
I know here they make a lot.
So it's something we may want to try to work with them. I think they're gonna, the one PTA brought it to us, so we have to look for some kind of solution, but maybe we can try to work together, so. I'd be interested to see what their take is when you talk to them, that's all.
Yeah, I want to agree with that. I said this last meeting too, which is, I wish that it had been made known to the parents or the PTA, members or whatever you want to call it, because I know I haven't ever heard anything like this, and had somebody said something to not just me, but other families that, I think we're all aware of, people would have opened up their wallets without even hesitation, and I don't necessarily understand. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. So I wish that's a scenario.
Yeah, I never knew that, I knew it existed, and I knew the PTAs just took care of it. And I'm more, knowledgeable about the one PTA that was doing 5 days a week than the other PTAs, since that's, sort of more my home base. But I never knew the numbers were this high and that it, took so many resources. I thought it was a handful of kids and it was easy for them to absorb without thinking about it.
Yeah, but I wish that would be the case.
Yeah, but when
just
you
put
looked
something
into
in.
the numbers, Steve, it actually, didn't dramatically increase this year.
No, it didn't.
It's just.
So,
Yeah, no, so I think, we're all surprised by these numbers. So, again, like, as you're doing, let's keep everything on the table, let's keep all the options open, and see what we can find out.
I do, and I think it's important that we continue to look into that because not only the PTAs, I do want to comment that our principals are very caring people and have made sure these students do have a lunch every day at their own expense. So please know that going forward, there aren't students sitting without lunches, that I have spoken with each principal and they have provided food if there was no food available to all those students. So we don't have anyone currently sitting without food every day, but it is an expense that our employees and our PTA should not be absorbing.
Even coats and clothes and things like that I've heard of.
Yes.
I've witnessed myself, so it's a pretty amazing group we have here. Everybody's willing to chip in and do that. But I think when you get to 71 kids, it almost can get overwhelming, and there needs to be a different solution.
Yeah, I'll agree. I'll just tell a quick story, actually. So the parent-teacher conferences last year were right before Halloween, and I was leaving parent-teacher conferences. Halloween, I think, was the day after. It was right when they were going to celebrate Halloween at school for the parade and everything at Lakeview, and one of the teachers was walking around classroom to classroom telling teachers that she had a student. The parent came in and said, I can't afford a costume. And they were all everybody's like, I got a costume, the amazing outpouring of teachers and parents and everybody just walking around the building at 8 o'clock at night trying to find a costume for this kid because they didn't want that one student to not have a costume, which is incredible. So I completely agree that our employees go above and beyond to make sure that students have things. And if things like that come up, I please pass along our thank you to them because they certainly make these students feel like they're as much a part of Denville as everybody else. So thank you.
Done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, I will open for public comments at
8:53.
8:53. Anyone from the public? Okay. Seeing none, I will close for public comments at 8:53. And I will open up for board comments. Anyone, don't be shy.
I'll make a motion to adjourn if we don't have any executive session.
Seeing no board comments, do we have a need for executive session?
Steve, do we have?
Yes, we do, sorry.
We do.
Yes, we do.
All right.
Sorry, Mr. Pass.
Okay. Mr. Cass, would you care to move us into executive session?
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All
Yes, I'll second that.
right, I'm going to move to convene an executive session in accordance with Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this closed session will be to discuss
Legal.
legal. Minutes of the session will be made available to the public. Well, the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
Yeas?
Second. That's second, right?
Well,
Who seconded?
Who seconded?
who second?
Mike?
Mike?
I'll second it, sure.
Mike second. All in favor?
Yay.
All against?
Nay.
It's a tie, so you can't.
Okay, I need 5 minutes. You on, Patrick?
I'm on right
Okay.
Your microphone's on.
And I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
now. All in favor?
Yay.
Yay.
All against? Crickets. Thank you very much.